segment of our program will be brought to us by Ruseas Brothers and Sisters in Foundation Incorporated. And we just want to advertise.
Yes. This is Richard Stevens inviting you to a very special event. Yeah, Ruseas Brosis Foundation inviting each and every one to come and celebrate with them on their New Year's Eve gala happening on the 31st of December 2020. Yes. Yeah, you know, when you give donation, it's going to the Colin Miller Sports Complex and students. So you know, so your money is securely going to a worthy cause. Russie is a great school. Yes, I never go there, but I know for a fact that it's a great school. So each and every one support Russie's Brosis Foundation Gala. Yes, it's a Zoom party, so you know it go. It's a virtual thing. So each and every one support a worthy cause. Richie Stevens said that.
Thank you. All right, big up Richie Stevens, big up every time. So we're big time people, we're big time. So want everybody to log in for the New Year's Eve gala and make sure you have a great time. Bring out your champagne, bring out your sparkling wine or sparkling juice, whatever you want to bring out. Great time. Bring out your champagne.
Yep, such is the case. Well, we certainly hope that it's going to be a successful event. We're looking forward to that, you know. We should extend apologies for the late start in this program, which was due to technical difficulties and challenges from the Jamaican standpoint, yes? So we apologize to all persons who are tuning in at this time. And just to say, though, that we're still in our fledgling state. We intend to improve on this program come 2021. So stand by, looking forward to the support. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you spread the word. Make sure you support Brosis Foundation. Over to you, Ken. What are you saying?
Yes, sir. So I just want to join with that. Make sure everybody like, share, subscribe, and we also invite your comments so that we can improve on the program. So our focus tonight will be on pre-season physical exam. You know, more commonly called school physical. And first of all, we're going to be looking at what's trending in sports. What do you have for us, John?
Well, you know, I'm really excited about the fact that boys and girls championships should be back on stream next year, 2020. In fact, they have identified the dates for boys and girls championships, and we're looking forward to that. It's now to be March 22 to 27th, of course, at the National Stadium. Champs is an institution, as you well know. It's probably one of the greatest high school track and field meet on the face of this earth. You know, I'm sure you must have experienced all of that, Ken.
Yes, sir. For those of us who love track and field, after the huge disappointment last year, we can't wait for this to happen. You know, we suffer great loss as a result of that. You know, but I was reading an article from the ISA boss, Keith Washington, and he was saying that protocols are being developed as we speak to ensure that champ take place, and they're using the meet that was held at Calabar, the Tyler Mills meet, you know, as a framework for what they're trying to do for champs. So it's almost certain that champs is going to be held for 2021.
But I hear, of course, they are saying that this all depends on how this COVID-19 issue progresses. You know, if it worsens, then they may have to actually revise the date again. I think they have a contingency plan in that regard. In May, they might actually do it in May. Of course, that might conflict with school exams for some of the kids. So it's, you know, but I think we should be good for March 22 to 27th. I'm hoping and praying that we'll have this spectacle of boys and girls champs, you know.
Yeah, as a result of that, the high level of compliance that they got at that Tyson Mills meet, they have a framework, and of course, the framework they have, they're going to have to, make sure they stay in contact with the Ministry of Health to see
Oh,
as
yeah, most certainly,
make
most
a
certainly.
decision. And it's usually held in late March, so hopefully they don't have to push it back any further. But John, what's going on with West Indies cricket, man?
Well, I don't know. It's I think we're suffering from what we have spoken about all along. The issue of training, um, consistent, progressive, grassroots training. I don't think we have the talent pool that we once had. And not only that, but I think the attitude of our present crop of cricketers, I think the attitude has kind of shifted a little bit to a more should I say a self-centered attitude more than a West Indies attitude, But I think it has to do with training. But funnily, I was listening to the sports news tonight, and I don't know if I should call his name, but one West Indies player is saying that he has improved, in his match against New Zealand, where he scored 108, I believe, in the opening test match. And he's now crediting his performance with his with his new fitness. So I found it strange that he's mentioning fitness. And I'm saying should not be a norm, should not be something that you're a norm. You're a professional sports person. Fitness should be a part and parcel of what you are, what you do. He seems surprised that because he was fitter now, he's performing better. And maybe that speaks for a lot of them. Maybe they're just not as fit as they should be in terms of cricket fitness now, eh? But yeah, we have work to do. We
It
have
was
work to
really
do.
bad, man. It was really bad. I look at it. In the 2020 series, they went down like it's a 3-game series, and it was 2-0. And in the longer version of the game, in the test, they also went down 2-0. And what's even worse is that the first test, I think, was played in Hamilton, and they lost by 134 runs and a whole inning.
So the big question still looms.
Yeah,
What are we lacking as West Indies cricket, in West Indies cricket? What are we lacking? We have a new president of the of West Indies cricket now, and he had promised to revamp and to renew and to re-energize the West Indies thrust, Well, we're still waiting on that, maybe it's early days yet, but I don't want to belabor the point too much. But
and
go ahead, go ahead.
even worse, the last match was played in Wellington, and they lost by an inning and 12 runs. But when you look at it, John, it's a matter of, I think they lack concentration. They lack concentration.
Well, that is what I'm saying. That all that is part and parcel of training. Training, and certainly your attitude, but training, I think these guys are geared more towards what they call one-day cricket, and even that is not so good nowadays. But let us see. But I don't want to belabor cricket too much because it kind of sometimes give me a bad feeling, almost embarrassing. But I don't want to forget this: that Usain Bolt, track and field again, has been named the best male athlete over the past 75 years by Athletics Weekly magazine. That's a very popular magazine that speaks to athletics happenings, eh? And they did a poll among their readers and listeners, and Usain Bolt again was voted as the best male athlete for the past 75 years since the start of the magazine to present day. That's quite an achievement, from Mr. Bolt again. Yeah, man, very interesting.
I'm not at all surprised when you look at his accomplishment. You know, you look at it on the track, and I was checking through it the other day, and Usain Bolt is the only athlete who won Athlete of the Year 9 times. 9 times he won Athlete of the Year.
Amazing stuff, man.
You know, and then you think about it, the closest person to him might be about 2 times or 3 times, I forget. But then I just look at the greatness of this guy, you know. So who else could have gotten that award? Nobody else could have gotten that award.
Well, that was a no-brainer. But let me add some balance to this though, because the female athlete was the distance runner, Dibada. I hope I'm pronouncing her name well. The Ethiopian, Tyronesh Dibada, and she's a distance runner. She was voted as the best. Yeah, she was voted as the best female athlete by the same magazine. And just to say though that Shelly-Ann Fraser was actually nominated in that pool as well, but she placed third. she didn't crop it this time, but she placed third, which is quite an achievement. Quite an achievement for Shelly-Ann to be placed third. But this lady, Turunish, I gather, Dibada, she won she was voted the best male athlete for the past 75 years, you know, so that's an achievement. Yeah, but football. We can talk a little bit about football in Jamaica here right now, and I suspect this may have some impact on schoolboy football as well. But we are now hearing that the Jamaica Premier League, it has been renamed, the Jamaica Premier League has been revamped. And Digicel is now the presenting sponsor. They have injected some $200 million into the hosting of the game over the next 3 seasons. Of course, there are other sponsors as well, but they are the presenting sponsor. I guess, you know, bigger money talk, you know. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to professionalize the Jamaica Premier League. They're trying to make it a professional entity. They have got Sportz Max, the TV broadcasting station, on board. And so we're going to be having live matches, live streaming, and delayed streaming as well. So it's taking on a new look, the football here in Jamaica. So we're gearing up for that, you know, come next year. We hope for the best for that, you know.
Yeah, hearing the game is just definitely going to bring some, if market properly, it's definitely going to bring some sponsors into the game.
Marketing.
So that's really good right there. You know, we needed to do that a long time ago to make sure each match is broadcast, you know, and know that they have a designated station and there's going to be also delayed broadcast, then that gives us an opportunity to see and for advertisement to take place that is going to generate some income that can go towards the whole program.
Right. But what more importantly though, I am hoping that will also have an impact on the quality of the game that we watch, you know, in terms of improving on the quality of the game right here in Jamaica, you know. Just improving on the way we play football, the way we approach football, the professionalism that is required to ascend to the higher levels of football in terms of the global football I'm talking about now, not just Jamaica football or regional, but beyond even the region, you know. So we look forward to good things coming out of that.
Let's also hope that the American audience is gonna be watching these games so that we can have guys getting contract or transfer from Jamaica to US or even to Europe, you know.
Well, that's an excellent point. Well, that's an excellent point. Excellent point. And that is why the Sportz Max and so on are now on board, because they will have, as I say, live feed to show to the globe. This is a global thing. So a lot of money involved in this. So we can only hope for the best. Let me not say hope. We expect improvement and we expect the best. Speaking of football, I mean, I remember some years ago in one of the World Cups that they had mentioned about introducing this new football that was supposed to travel more freely through the air. I guess what I'm hitting at here is the issue of technology in sport. That has been ongoing from the day it was one, you know. But I recently saw where Adidas has introduced this new high-tech shoe, technology in sport here. This new high-tech shoe, and the shoe is called Ad-Zero Adidas Pro shoe. And it's supposed to make people run more efficiently. In fact, the Kenyan runner, Kibawatt Candle, he actually broke the half marathon record. He did so in Valencia, wearing the shoe. So I guess my question is it the shoe or the athlete? But technology in sport is a big thing now. And next year, I think it's going to be even bigger, technology in sport,
I would say it's both, both the shoe and the athlete. But so this shoe is actually being designed for maybe middle distance runners and long distances. Yeah, I was reading an article on that also. I see where Royal Athletic is saying in order to make sure they have a balanced ballpark, that they would not allow an athlete to just wear a shoe that was built specifically for that athlete.
Okay.
The shoe would have to be built and be put out on the market so that everybody can purchase it. I think the time that they gave was at least 3 months before that shoe can be worn, so that everybody, it's available to the public on a whole, or to every athlete that on a whole that is going to be participating in sport.
Okay, great. But technology is going to be a big part of sport. If I'm not mistaken, did they have some kind of suit for swimmers at one point too, that let them glide through the water even more efficiently?
Sure. Yes,
technology again, eh? But come to think of it, I remember as a kid playing football, watching and playing football. The ball, especially when it would have rained, the ball was heavy, In other words, when you hit the ball, but when it was wet, you could sometimes almost risk a concussion, because the ball used to soak up water and was really, really heavy. Nowadays, modern balls, again, due to improvement in technology and the materials that they use, the ball remains almost the same weight, even if it's wet. And that is, I think, a significant improvement, because I remember trying to kick some of those balls, boy, when it was wet, man, it was a challenge, man. I mean, hey, mind you develop good strength, leg strength in doing so, but Lord, very interesting. Technology in sport is here to stay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything else that you want to talk about?
Well, I think those are the buzz things in sport. Lots of things going on in sport, but I think those are some of the salient issues we can actually touch on, So,
okay, so the main segment of our program will be brought to you by Learning Together Mathematics Tutorial Session, live on Ruseas Brosis YouTube channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays of each week from 3 o'clock to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Our host is Mr. Desmond Dunkley. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the programs. So John, we said that tonight's program is going to be focusing on pre-season physical exam. And so we just want the audience to be aware of the fact that we're talking about the same thing that you guys would call a physical exam, except that the focus is on athletes.
Yes, seriously. Well, it's actually a very serious thing, And I think that became even more important when we have had a series of deaths. And I think, was it last year or the year before, when this footballer from Georges collapsed on the field of play during a Manning Cup match and died. He was from Georges. And prior to that, we have had, the occasional instance of an athlete dying, sudden death. There was a runner who went to Trinidad and, having run, collapsed again and died, a Jamaican athlete. I remember in my own experiences as the physiotherapist for it was a Jamaica basketball side, and we were about to go to a CARICOM tournament in Cuba. And the medical team insisted that each of the youngsters should be tested, at least a basic evaluation as to where they were in terms of their physical status. Lo and behold, one of the key players, who was a good, talented kid, ended up, it was diagnosed with a hole in his heart. No, I'm not laughing here because it's a serious thing. A hole in his heart. Now, this kid was playing through high school and playing and doing well and fit and everything, you know. And he had a hole in his heart. In other words, I don't want to sound too gloomy, but he was actually waiting to die. Any moment he could have died. Had we taken this kid to Cuba in the heat of tournament and his first outing there, excitement, adrenaline flowing, who knows what could have happened, you know? So the pre-participation examination is absolutely important. But just to highlight the aims of it quickly, I know time is of the essence, but one, I'm going to call it PPE for short, you know?
Yes, it's all PPE.
Ideally, this should be done, yes, ideally it should be done at the very least, let's say about 6 weeks before your preseason training. At the very least, so that you can have time to rehabilitate if you want, or correct any abnormalities, right? But just to highlight some of the key aims of this. One is just to maintain the health and safety of athletes, basically. You know, it serves to promote safe participation, not to exclude now, but to promote safe participation, right? And if any abnormality is found, then you find that the athlete can be rehabilitated or ideally redirected to another sport. And we're going to talk about that later on as we go along, you know? So yeah, so the key objectives really is just to determine if any condition, you're about to say something. Let me give you space, yes.
Yeah, you know, John, it's so important that you said that. I was thinking, you know, we know that for sure that athletes who are not in shape are more likely to have injuries, right? And so just like you said, it is no doubt that the first step in preparing an athlete for participation should be, as the participating in sports, should be PPE. You know, and this is not just for athletes. So we want our viewing audience to know that this is not just for athletes. When you go to the doctor, are you certain? Now, when you go to clinician, because nowadays you have nurse practitioners doing physical examination also, as also physician assistant. So when you go to do a physical exam, do you know whether or not that physical examination covers all the areas that needs to be covered? So that's what this program is all about. So we want all our viewers to understand that it's not just for athletes, it's for you also to understand what are the areas of focus when you go to do a general physical exam.
But let me just add to that, that a medical evaluation should be done by everyone, really. But in the case of an athlete, a person who exerts, you know, in extreme conditions, it becomes even more important to have physical evaluations, right? Because remember, you know, the objectives really are to determine if any condition that exists that could pose this athlete to injury, this could predispose this athlete to injury. You know, it's the objective here again is to detect if there's any condition that could be life-threatening, or again, as I said before, predispose the athlete to injuries, right? And especially in the case of the United States, you know, you do these things so that you can meet and satisfy any legal or insurance requirements, because, you know, in the States, the issue of insurance and so on is you know, is important. And of course, there are a big issue. Yes, man, very important. And of course, there are other secondary objectives, like just to determine general health and to advise, I think importantly, or counsel the athlete on any health-related issue. In other words, if you detect something abnormal, you can advise this athlete and counsel him, say, hey, this is not right, and these are the steps that you need to take to better yourself, you know? So those are some of the key objectives and the aims and some of a pre-evaluation exercise.
So the PPE then is a thorough examination that includes a general health exam, you know, as well as checking like your circulatory system, your respiratory system, neurological, musculoskeletal system, vision, hearing. All of these exams should be conducted or should be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think we're going to delve a little bit more in each one, just to let our viewers understand. I know time again, we have to watch the time, but as briefly as we can, just touch base on, you mentioned several components a while ago. Can we just touch a little bit more on, you know?
Yeah, may I also add that you should also ensure that you do a routine blood and urine analysis to check for certain things that we're going to discuss later on. And if the physician see any of these things showing up in the exam, then of course a note has to be made and to ensure that this when the physical is handed into the coach, that the coach is aware of this, and the coaches have to make sure they get themselves familiarized with any athlete who have been diagnosed with any situation that allow them to participate but need to be monitored. For example, if somebody suffer from asthma, that doesn't mean that the person cannot participate, but you have to make sure that the person has their inhaler with them at all times. Okay, so what we're going to do now, John, then we're going to go into actually explain to our viewers what really is actual physical exam. How does it happen? You know, usually start by a pre-screening, you know.
Well, let me jump in again, because in terms of just the components alone, you have mentioned that several things, but in terms of just the components alone of this PPE, you know, a good medical history is a critical start. When we talk about medical history, the medical staff or the person supervising the evaluation is going to focus on things like, for instance, whether or not the athlete has any medical conditions or diseases. You have already mentioned things like asthma. We're going to find out whether or not the athlete had any previous surgeries, had any previous surgeries and what they are. We're going to find out if this athlete has ever been hospitalized. So all this is part of the history that you have to take, right? We're going to find out if this athlete has any kind of known allergies to any kind of medication, allergies to even insect bites, because sometimes you're playing in the grass, you might get a bee sting. A bee sting sometimes can be fatal.
Exactly.
One bee sting can be fatal to some persons, right? Whether you have any allergies in terms of the environment, just environmental issues, period. And in terms of the female athlete, there are some specifics to the female athlete as well. Your menstrual history, any abnormality may indicate, maybe an indication of some hormonal insufficiency or abnormality. So all these things are important, but I think we need to just, again, delve a little bit more, just coming down from head to toe, so that we can just a little bit more, or so that we can, advise our listeners a little bit of what goes on in terms of the various.
So what I'm going to do then, John, I'm going to go ahead and say, so you walk into a clinic or you walk into an office and you're either going to come across, like John was saying to me that in Jamaica, you were saying to me that in Jamaica, the physical exam is still done by physicians, right?
They're done, well, sometimes there are two parts. And it depends on money. Ideally, it should be done by trained medical professionals, ideally,
Okay.
right? But that will cost more money, you know? But there's also the on-field, outside of clinic assessments that can be done, right? And those kind of things that kind of setting will look at, you know, your height and your weight and your pulse rate and your blood pressure, you know, testing eyesights and your ear, nose, and throat and so on and so forth, you know.
So I was just giving them a rundown. The way it is here in America, and it started, you know, sometime back in about 2006. A lot of this responsibility when it comes to PPE is passed on to nurse practitioners. And like I said before, and a lesser note onto physician assistant. And so usually when you walk into the office, the first thing they're going to check is, you know, they're going to check, do a pre-screening, which is going to be dealing with your medical history, your personal medical history, and your family medical history. So they may ask you stuff like, are you on any medication? Are you taking any legal drug? Do you consume alcohol? Do you consume coffee? And now they're also asking you about if anybody at your house have any COVID-19 symptoms. And they're asking you if you have any symptoms from COVID-19, such as vomiting, dry cough, any kind of cough, headache, stuff like those. So that's what happens when you actually walk into an office. Those are the things that they usually do.
Right. But let me just tag on to that as well, because you just mentioned something about family, and that's going to be very important. Your family history of any kind of diseases. In other words, if your father or your mother or even your grandfather had any incidents of let's say hypertension, which is what we call high blood pressure.
High blood pressure.
Right. Then it's going to be important that this be known, because that means that you are, you know, in line, if you're not careful, for that kind of malady as well.
Also,
it's important to know if your mother or father had diabetes, for instance, or heart disease, because therefore you might well be in line for that. So your family history is very important, you know. Yes, family history.
Yes, so they also, just like you mentioned, hypertension, and they also check for hypoglycemia to see if you have the high blood sugar.
Well, that's diabetes, really. You know, that's where diabetes comes from.
Diabetes, so you did mention that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and discuss for them, John, the standard examination starting from head down. So we're going to deal with the neurological system first. So you want to go on starting with the neurological system?
Well, what is the neurological system? So we're talking about the brain and the central nervous system. That system is responsible for what? Your balancing, your proprioception, and your kinesthetic awareness. Muscle perception really is just your awareness of your body part in space. You know, how far are you from an object, you know, and so on. I mean, for instance, when you climb a flight of stairs, you don't really look at the stairs, and make sure that you raise your foot 6 inches high each time you climb. You put a step. Once you make the first step, automatically you adjust yourself and you climb stairs going up. Some persons with a neurological deficit, they buck their toe because they have lost the sense of proprioception. They cannot judge that readily, right? So you probably want to investigate what sport, you know, the type of sport where balance is critical, the type of sport where proprioception or your kinesthetic sense is critical. So we look at things like gymnastics, for instance. and you're on a balance beam, a balance beam. I still don't understand how those athletes do we call it a somersault and a 4-inch wide piece of plank. That is amazing, when you think about the skill level required to do that. Now, if you have a neurological deficit, I want to believe that no way you can do that unless you are rehabilitated. So neurological assessment is critical, particularly for certain sport. And that's what we're saying. And remember, we mentioned that, let's say there's this athlete with a neurological deficit. So you can't be the gymnast, but maybe we can direct you to another sport. We can tell you to go try rowing, Olympic rowing. You don't really have to have no serious sense of balance to do that. All you need is upper strength, power, and strength. So yes, that's neurological for you. You can assess that. Yes.
Yeah, and just want to add to that it also has to do with your muscle coordination. Also, when you talk about the brain and central nervous system, coherence is a part of what the physician or the clinician would be looking for. Any developmental disabilities, they will be looking for that also. And if it affects the sports you're going to be doing. All right, so we can move on to vision then, John.
All right, vision. Yeah, well, oh Lord. Well, vision speaks for itself in terms of the acuity of vision, how sharp how quickly you see things and make things out. But again, I like to link it to sport. I think I like to link it to sport right away. In which sport is vision very important? We talk about 20/20 vision. As you get older, sometimes your vision, it's not as sharp, but in which sport is vision of the, very, very important? And we look at things like even shooting, rifle shooting, or maybe even archery, where you have to have that, you have to be seeing, the target. Literally, you have to be seeing the target, But even in things like cricket, in cricket, for instance, where the eye-hand coordination is again absolutely critical. If you have a cricketer who is not seen well, then I need not say anymore. You better make sure that you wear your box all the time, because you're going to get licked with that hard ball. So vision again,
because of specialties here in America, a lot of times when you go to do your PPE, not a whole lot of attention is paid to vision. So pretty much all they're doing is checking to make sure you have 20/20 or 20/40 vision. And then what they would normally do, send you on to a specialist who would from there tell you whether or not you need sports glasses in order to
participate. Right, exactly. So you get, and that's part of the rehabilitation.
Right.
You get, you correct the problem so that you can compete in your sport. I remember in my football days, there was a player who used to play for a side called Rectory. He wore some special contact lenses when he played, because he couldn't see well enough otherwise, so he wore that. I mean, that in itself is a risk, but he wore that to play, and he played well. He was a good player. He actually was from England, But let's continue, because I want
to move on to hearing. Yeah, because hearing is very important also when it comes to sports, right?
It's absolutely important. Very important. And again, I'm trying to link it to see which sport would be, and maybe our listeners can write in some of their own experiences in terms of, when hearing is important. It's not as important, I would think, as vision and as, and so on. But hearing is key too. In a football, when you're in a stadium, for instance, and there's a lot of noise, but you need to listen to instructions. If you can't hear well and differentiate between, mumbo jumbo and directions, then hey, you might well pose, a risk not only to yourself but to your teammates as well too. And I'm sure there are other sports, but hearing is self-explanatory, I think.
Yeah, because and they usually what they do, they use a tuning fork, and then I don't know if most people know what that is. It's just like a two-pronged stuff that look like a fork. Then they have like a piece of stick that they use, and they hit it, and then they'll sit it on top of the head and see if people are able to identify high pitch and low pitch when it comes to noise. So
Yes.
pretty much, I remember earlier on you mentioned about gymnastics, for instance. So of course they would be checking to see if there's any infection in the inner ear also, because if there's a problem with the fluid, then you're going to lose balance, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
We can move on.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the cardiopulmonary area of our examination.
All right. So cardiopulmonary systems, and we cannot break it down. Cardio as in heart, and pulmonary as in breathing, the breathing system.
Yeah.
We cannot link both, but they can be separated as well. An assessment of that is critical. I had already alluded to my experience with a kid who had a hole in his heart. But when you assess your cardiac response, you're talking about how efficient your cardiovascular system is. Can it deliver adequately blood to working muscles? And again, this goes on to, even your diet. A person who has a diet that is high in cholesterol, for instance, may well find that their cardiovascular system is compromised. It doesn't deliver adequately. So therefore, when you are when you're put under strenuous situations now, you might well find that you run into problems. You might well find that because you don't get enough blood delivered to even your brain and your working muscles, you reach exhaustion more quickly, or in a worst case scenario, you faint. you can faint. But the pulmonary system again. This is talking about how you take in air and how you process air and deliver that to working muscles. If you have a history of asthma, if you have a history of bronchitis, if you have a history of emphysema, all of that will speak to potentially limitations in how well you can utilize oxygen. And that will mean that, your function, the efficiency with which how you function will be compromised. So we have to assess that to see how well you do. And that is one situation where, especially high-level athletes, that is best done in laboratory conditions. And this is what the professional athletes do. They assess that part of them if there's any note of abnormality, they take them to further testing to check to see what kind of problems may rest in your cardiopulmonary or your cardiorespiratory system. Very important, man. Very important.
Okay,
very,
so
very important.
Yeah, so just like you said, I had it together, but the cardiopulmonary system. But you just like you said, we can separate them. But the fact is that both of them work together, and they're under extreme strain whenever you're doing exercise. So
that is the engine. That is what
the
the gas
system and the respiratory system. They have to be supplying the contracting muscles when you're doing
exactly.
And so they have to work together, because when they're under this complete stress, they have to work together to provide the energy that's needed. All right,
absolutely.
So pretty much what you're checking for when you do that, you're checking to see if there is any complication, any shortness of breath, or any shortness of breath with pain when the person is exercising. So that's pretty much what you're checking for.
Absolutely. And just to make a note again on more specifically the cardiac or the cardio system, the cardiovascular system. Again, it's important to check it for, especially abnormalities in the heart, palpitations, murmurs, and so on. And this is why during the history, when you're taking the history, they'll ask you, if you have any family member who may have had a heart problem, they will ask you if you have had any history of chest pain, or so on, because those are, signs that you may have other deeper underlying problems. But we can go on, and in terms of time again, I want to touch base with some more things. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess we can move on to the musculoskeletal system or orthopedics as it relates to the physical exam.
Yes.
And in this case, we're pretty much checking for things like joint stability, right? And
right.
we're checking for deformities such as kyphosis. And for our listening audience, we just want to mention that this has to do with pretty much like a curvature on the spinal column. So usually what will happen is that you go to the examination and they'll ask you to bend over and touch your toes. And if this is present, then you usually can either see it or sometimes when you run down the spinal column, you can feel it. And John, last night while we were talking, you were mentioning something about people who have scoliosis, right?
Right, indeed. And you find that a lot of people have scoliosis. A scoliosis really is just a curvature in the spine, a lateral curvature or wherever. Just a curvature, an abnormal curve in the spine. And well, the greatest athlete for the past 75 years has a scoliosis. We just mentioned it earlier. You see a goal. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to affect performance. It depends on the degree of curvature. So many of us have abnormal curvatures, right, in the spine, but it doesn't have to affect your performance. But and this is why we assess to see if there is anything outside of the norm that can affect your performance or can predispose you to injury. That is it. But just to touch some more on the musculoskeletal issues, joint stability is one thing, but you also want to look at, and we mentioned this earlier, the thing about past surgeries. For instance, the classic knee surgery, where the
ACL.
Anterior cruciate ligament injuries that basketballers and football players have. So if you have experienced an injury like that, then chances are you are prone to an unstable knee joint.
Correct.
Only that, but you're also more prone now to what they call osteoarthritis. You are more prone to that because of what has gone on. And even if you have experienced surgical repair, you may end up with complications. So it's important to know this from early so that we can put in rehabilitative and special training to make sure that, by the time the season comes around, you're adequately equipped to deal with the rigors of your sport. Particularly like a basketballer that does a lot of sudden twists and turns. I don't have to mention the football. I mean, your football, not soccer now, but American football. You have to have stable knee joint to survive that sport. So you have to have if you have a weak knee, and let me just add quickly, interestingly, that once you have had, for instance, a knee joint injury like that, or even ankle joint injury, right away, what we mentioned, your proprioception, your balance, and your kinesthetic awareness become compromised. It falls off. So now we know that you have had this surgery. We have to right away start to make sure that we put in special training for you to build that capacity. That means when season comes around, you are not, at a deficit in that regard. So that musculoskeletal thing is, I think that is the crux of everything. Because if you don't have a stable body, you forget it. You forget it.
Absolutely.
You can take medication for asthma, but even if you take medication, you're weaky and fenke, you're in trouble.
John, as you're talking about the musculoskeletal system, I'm here thinking about how prevalent ligament damages are. And I always tell my athletes, one of the main reasons for that is that we don't see a lot of coaches focusing on exercises that strengthen those areas, especially I'm talking about the knee joint area, so those that ligaments that are in the knee. So I don't know if it's the same problem you see there in Jamaica, but here.
But this I'm kind of enjoying this dialogue. You know why? Because was it the last session or the session before, the program before, we spoke about the importance of strength training in sport.
Correct.
And in my experiences, I have found, and in a clinical set, in my own clinical setting as well, that those athletes who engage in especially pre-season and early season proper strengthening, they have a lower incidence of ligamentous injury. Not only that,
for sure,
if they should incur a ligamentous injury, the severity of that injury is less. In other words, you have degrees of ligamentous injury. You have a first degree, second degree, third degree, and so in some cases even a higher level, fourth degree. Third degree injuries is what is surgery. Either you do surgery or you're out for life. That's it. You end up your career done. Right? A second degree with good rehab, you can come back. A first degree injury is really minor. You rest it, you ice it, you strengthen, and you're back again. That is, as a coach, that is what you want to get. If you're going to get no injury, you want to get a first, a less severe injury, so you can use your athletes again. I have found that strength training, especially proper strength training from early out, protects you against that. But they're very common. Basketballers, netballers, well, footballers, and all those. But injuries like crazy.
I'm still wondering though, why is it that more focus is not paid to those areas? Because
I know why.
For most of these professionals, let's not go to professional. Let's say in the high school system, if you go to an athlete and say, okay, do abdominal, they know what abdominal is. But if you say, do an exercise to strengthen your ligaments in your knees, all right, nobody knows what to do. So I'm trying to figure out why.
That is it.
Why is it we're having the problem going on and on where footballers are having that problem?
I will tell you why.
Among basketball players, and yet there's not a whole lot of focus in strengthening that area.
Well, I will tell you why. And it's in one word. And we mentioned it before. One word: ignorance. Ignorance on the part of the person who is organizing the training of these, and when I say young athletes, ignorance, and sometimes too a little dose of fear. And we mentioned it earlier that coaches, and you see, we're going to a more professional system now come next year in football. I have found that we can't depend on coaches to do what a trainer, a specialist trainer should do. In our situation, the coach does everything. The coach do pre-season training, the coach do strength training, the coach do stamina training, and the coach skills and so on. You can't do that no more. Because strength training, stamina training are specialist areas now. Unless the coach is so versatile that he can do everything, which I don't believe. You need to focus on your talent that you have, focus on your coaching, your strategies, how you develop the best of this athlete, rather than trying to build strength. No, leave that to somebody else who knows how to do it. I don't find that happening in a lot of our sport here. It has changed somewhat, thanks to GC Foster College, because of that. Now you have a spreading out of more persons who are more knowledgeable, not the best in terms of totally knowledgeable, but more knowledgeable. At least can start something, with especially young athletes. But that is it really. That is it really. They just don't know and don't know how to apply it enough,
Okay, before we go on to our next segment, the next segment of our program will be brought to us by Learning Together English Language Tutorial Session live on Ruseas Brosis YouTube channel each Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Your host is none other than Don Dawes. So I think we should now move into, we have covered the standard examination. I think we should now move into the blood and urine analysis.
Yeah, well, I mean.
So for the blood, when we think about the blood analysis, people might see where they come and they use a syringe and they withdraw blood from you. Pretty much what they're doing in the exam, they're checking for anemia and also for infection. And you want to add anything to that, John?
No, I was just about to say that in a nutshell, an analysis of the blood really gives you a snapshot of exactly what your inner workings. It tells you exactly what is going on inside of you. You can assess just about everything through the analysis of blood, right? We mentioned, last week we mentioned about drugs, for instance. I mean, and urine too. You can assess what you have eaten, how much you have eaten, whether or not you have a nutritional deficiency, whether or not you lack calcium, whether or not you lack iron, by way of checking blood. And that is critical, especially for high-level athletes, where they do an analysis and and will tell you that, hey, you are short on iron, you are short on calcium, you're short on certain other minerals, and if you're short on that, then your muscles not going to function efficiently. So, and then you can rehabilitate. You can either go on supplements or eat callaloo to build up your calcium level. But those things are critical. The blood and urine analysis are, and I think especially at the higher levels of athletes competition, more towards the elite levels, that it becomes more important, Yes.
So if I want to add that if there's a deficiency in your iron, which is you're anemic, then usually this is a common cause for too few red blood cells. And we need the red blood cell because, of course, if you have too few red blood cells, then you have a problem with your hemoglobin. And for most of our audience, the hemoglobin is a protein molecule that carries oxygen from your lungs to all the tissues of the body. So whenever you're anemic, then as an athlete, usually what the clinician will do is recommend that you start eating a lot of green leafy vegetable and also organ meat. When we talk about organ meat, talking about liver, kidney, and so forth. So this is definitely something that must be checked. We also, like I said earlier on, we're also checking for any elevated level of the white blood cell, because if there's an elevated level of the white blood cell, it's indicating to you that some infection is present, because the main purpose of the white blood cell is to fight off infection. So if you see an elevated level of white blood cell, then it's actually telling you that there is some level of infection present. So then treatment would be needed in that case.
Yeah, man, indeed. And I let me just add on to that in terms of, again, the blood issue. One of the critical things that they look forward to is what they refer to as your oxygen saturation. And it ties into the issue of, you know, hemoglobin that you mentioned, but your oxygen saturation, in other words, and simply put, is just how much oxygen is in your blood, a bit that is available to your tissues, really. But let me just harp back again on what thing, the kind of conditions that can affect your oxygen saturation. And we had already mentioned some of the things. For instance, if you have an asthmatic condition, if you have a history of bronchitis, if you have a history of emphysema, if you have a history of high cholesterol, all these things can affect the amount of oxygen that's available in your blood. And of course, that will impede your performance, because as you mentioned, it's not going to provide adequate nutrients and so on to your working muscles or even to your brain. What else can affect your oxygen saturation? When you go to high elevations, for instance, when you go to areas that is much higher than where you're, high altitudes, right away, that can affect your oxygen saturation. This is why athletes, if you're going to, what's the place, what's that country called? It was Peru or one of those countries. You go from a week or two before so that you can get acclimatized to high elevation. High elevation means that there's less oxygen available in the atmosphere. So therefore, you go there and your body, and that's the beauty of the body, eh? Your body can adapt. Once it senses that it needs to work harder, you adapt. So after 2 weeks, you are now acclimatized, you can perform more efficiently. If you go there and try, like tonight, wake up tomorrow and try to run, you drop down. you can't. And so yeah, all that is important. All of that is important.
So before
go ahead.
We discuss the urine now, the urine analysis, and you're pretty much checking for any abnormalities when it comes to your kidney, and you also see if there's any infection in your urinary tract. So you're checking also to see if there is elevated level of nitrate in your urine, because if you have an elevated level of nitrate, it could increase your chance of having heart disease, certain heart disease.
Yeah. And as I say, urine, again, it provides a window of a lot of things that's happening in your body, just like the blood. A lot of things, and you have mentioned some of them already. But even again, the use of drugs, that again can show up in urine. And we mentioned last week about use of diuretics to kind of flush things out, and why they are banned, because they will suspect that you're hiding something. So the urine again tells a tale, And I said, but I want to feel again that is more for the higher level athletes, more so, higher, more elite type athletes, rather than, let's say, high school type athletes. Certainly in our situation here, Anything else that we can add to?
So we talk about performance enhancing drugs last week, and so this is exactly where you're gonna pretty much most of this.
That was what I was just saying. Yes,
it would show. Okay, before we go into the final segment of our program, this segment is going to be presented by Empowerment Hour, live on Ruseas Brosis YouTube channel every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Our host is Darwin Daly. Please do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment to all our programs.
Go Darwin. I just wanted to add though that this PPE and the overall assessment of athletes, it is done again, as I said, to provide a kind of snapshot as to the status of the athlete, and and whether or not the physician or the person who is doing the evaluation or the assessment can give you clearance to go on to further training. Sometimes they don't give you clearance. Sometimes they say to you, no, you have a situation here where you have to fix before you can go on to training. You know, sometimes, and it depends, of course, on the sport. You know, you have some sport that sports that are, let's say, high impact. You know, in terms of, you know, you're going to get hit and so on. You know, contact and collision type sport. You have sports that with limited contact. You have sports that are strenuous but no contact. You know, they have sports that are, you know, moderately strenuous, no contact. And of course, they have sports that are not strenuous and no contact, you know. So it depends on the sport and whether or not, you know, we can say, all right, you know, based on where you are, you can still play. Or they could say, based on where you are, you can't play the sport. And this is where the importance of assessment and evaluation comes in. In some cases, they will tell you, listen, boy, because of what you have here, we don't advise you to even play this sport anymore. It's best you go to do a different sport. And that is the reality. That is the reality. You know?
Okay, so then let's look at some of the problems that might be found by a clinician when you do a PPE that could disqualify the athlete from competing. You talk about it earlier on, we talk about asthma. If you have uncontrolled asthma, then that would disqualify the athlete.
Yeah, certainly. And disqualify you from the sport that puts a lot of stress on your cardiorespiratory system.
Correct.
Right? So, but maybe you can play table tennis. Maybe you can play table tennis. You know, so which is, you still have to move, but it doesn't leave you breathless, so to speak, you know? Go ahead.
Okay, and we have also uncontrolled high blood pressure.
High blood pressure again. Now that's, you know what they call high blood pressure? The silent killer.
Yes, sir.
You know, some people, many of us listening now, right now, may well be hypertensive and don't know because we don't have any immediate symptoms. Some of those symptoms are like dizziness and nausea and fainting and syncope and so on. You know,
and the symptoms are actually different in men than they are in women, right?
In many cases, you know, and we can go into that. But the point I was trying to make though is that you can live a life and you didn't realize that you are hypertensive until one day, bam, what? Boop, you get at the very least what they call a TIA, a transient ischemic. I thought it was like a miniature stroke, you know, a stroke. Yeah, and I started to say my daddy died of a stroke, and I was about what, 11 or 10, and that's, I tell you, it scared me. It scared me. I couldn't understand why he had to die, you know, and he just never recovered. Stroke. I tried to say hi to the man. The man didn't respond. He went to the hospital in a coma. Next day he was gone. You know, that is what scares me. So because of that history, you know, I eat a certain way, I live a certain way, simply because, and I tell my kids the same thing too. So it's a learned experience, you know. Yeah,
yes,
man.
And also uncontrolled diabetes.
Yes, and what we commonly call in colloquial terms, sugar. A man have sugar. But you know what the alarming thing is with the sugar thing? The evidence is showing that younger people rather, are now showing up with diabetes. Formerly, it was, you know, older people, you know, 60 odd, 70 odd, 80 odd, you know, they have sugar, and it's almost like expected in many cases. Hey, he's old. But no, people from 30 odd, 40 odd, early 50s are now being diagnosed with diabetes, you know, which is just abnormally high blood sugar. And guess what? In many cases, it's a lifestyle issue. In few cases, you know, it's congenital, or you're born with a kind of abnormality in terms of how you process sugar. But in the majority of cases, is how you live, your lifestyle, you know, and I don't want to point fingers on certain foods, but yeah, we just eat too much sugar, man, and sit down on our backsides for too long.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to get up anymore to change the TV station. We have 100 stations, and you don't have to get up to change one. You know, we sit every day, and you know, we gobble down high-calorie food, and so you know, you're in a diabetes, you're diabetic. But that for the athlete, that's a major issue for the athlete. Major issue, you know, major issue. But that is why assessment is important, you know. Yes.
Okay, and we need to talk about heart conditions also. You spoke about murmuring and so forth at the heart earlier on. So if there's a serious heart condition that could disqualify an athlete also. And also,
we mentioned them already, actually. You know,
also epilepsy could disqualify an athlete.
And that's in the colloquial terms, we call it fits.
Fits, right? That is it.
Fits, seizures.
Yeah, and I think we made mention of it also, not in detail, but if there is a situation whereby the person had previous head injuries.
Oh, and that's in fact a part of the assessment that the medical assessment history. They normally ask you if you have had any concussion during your sport or even as a child. If you have had a head injury with a motor vehicle accident, you fell from a bicycle, you fell off a tree because you're climbing, you were playing football and you bumped your head with somebody else, you lost consciousness, you went to the hospital. These are important things, you know, because that concussion is a very serious thing. In fact, they have done a lot of studies now. And they're now saying that if you have had more than, you know, a number of concussions, they'll probably exclude you from certain sport. Yeah, they're very serious about it now.
If I'm not mistaken, in American football, I think it's 3. They allow you up to 3, if I'm not mistaken.
That's what I'm saying. They have limitations now. In fact, remember, you know, they're talking about football, heading in football. They're looking at, well, I don't know if they can even ban that thing, you know, but they've been investigating it. The incidents, or the relationship rather, between heading in football and other long-term neurological and cognitive deficits later on. You know, the impact that it has.
That's what a lot of, you know, and football is played so frequently in Jamaica and it's a big sport, but a lot of coaches does not outline the inherent risk of that sport.
But it's not wide, it's a new thing, it's a new paradigm, it's a new area now. I don't think coaches are sufficiently, have been sufficiently advised. It's just now coming to the fore. In terms of concussion, you know, they wouldn't know much about it right now because it would mean telling the youngsters don't hit a ball. Can you imagine football without hitting? I don't know what you but I think
I don't know if it's so much the heading as the contact when you go up with another and then.
But that, but that happens infrequently, man. Heading, you will hit a ball 5, 6, 7 times throughout the day. The repetition, bang, 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 bang. That is what will create a problem. But I think our time is running short.
Also, any previous spinal injuries?
Oh yeah, well, certainly, because if you're talking about spinal injury, you're talking about the critical thing called the spinal cord. I think we touched on neurological issues already, but the spinal cord is a critical. If your spinal cord is being compromised, then hello, you know, everything else, your movement, everything becomes, your motor skills, your motor activity becomes compromised, you know. And yeah, so you have to know these things. We've got to know these things because it could mean that if you have suffered a spinal injury before, it could mean that you're still carrying a muscular or, let me just say broadly, a neurological deficit, which could manifest itself as weakness, imbalances in a particular muscle. It could manifest itself as balance issues. it could manifest itself as all of those things that we would have mentioned earlier on the neurology, you know. But yeah, they're very interesting though. But let me just say though, that and probably just to conclude, and we can have the final word, that just to advise coaches out there who may be listening to us, or persons like come new year, insist that particularly your junior athletes, insist that they do have some sort of assessment before you you put them on the field of play to start big training. Let them just at least, basic evaluations, that body mass index, little things that you can do, just do little things so that you have at least a baseline. And this is what the evaluation does too, provide a baseline for you, as well,
So we should, I think we should go deal with evaluation on our next program because they're so closely related. So we'll go on to that. But in addition to the other thing I wanted to talk about is any chronic orthopedic problems, such as unstable knee, ankle, shoulder, whatever joint might be unstable. Those things might disqualify you also. And I just want to add to something that you said. So hopefully Mr. Henry, the coach of Ruseas High School in Jamaica, who is a good friend of mine, hopefully Mr. Henry will ensure that before any of these guys come to camp, before they come to camp, they turn in a physical.
No, well, may I just add, if I'm not mistaken, and I stand to be corrected on this, that ISA, the body that governs schoolboy sport, I think it's not a rule, given the past experiences in sudden death and so on of junior athletes. They are now saying that you must have physical examination, medical examinations before they start to train. I think that's now a rule of ISA. So there you go. But I'll give you the last word to wrap up. Yes, I think it's now a rule. I'm gonna double check on that. Don't quote me, but I think it's now a rule. Yeah.
I'm almost certain if it's not a rule yet, they're working on it because of the experiences that they have had in the past.
Yeah, man. It's quite devastating, We're not a youngster should fall down on the field of play and die. It's devastating, man. Devastating. But yes.
Okay, so we have come to the end of another Sports Talk program. We want to say thanks to all our viewers. And again, please do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and we invite very much your comments, whether negative or positive. This is only going to help us to continue to reach that growth stage. So we invite all your comments. And we have to say special thanks because you guys have taken time out of your Christmas Eve to listen to us. So we want to say...
it is Christmas Eve, no? It is Christmas Eve.
so we want to say to everybody, all the viewers, Merry Christmas to you and your family. Yes, and we look forward to coming back to you live again if God spare our life for the new year.
Yeah, I think this is the last program for this year, no? Yeah.
Yes, sir,
next year we'll take it up again. We're gonna do our homework, and I think we're gonna do a better job at responding to persons who send in questions and so on. We're gonna have a system for that come next year. So yes, this has been a learning experience. I thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe, like, and let us move forward. All the best to you too, sir, in Chicago.
Merry Christmas. Good night.
Yes, sir. Peace and love. Alrighty.